Okay, Dante's Inferno, Part 2. We're going to cover cantos 12 through 23. Um, on the screen here, you see a map of the Inferno. Again, you can see a lot of the different beasts that he encounters in the Inferno, and the different levels of hell, going down to Satan at the very bottom, and all the other creatures and levels of different types of sinners in between. On a bigger scale, here's a map of how Dante's Divine Comedy sees the world. You can see in the center here is the earth. There's the hemisphere of earth and the hemisphere of water. And you can see that here at the bottom of the world, down at the very bottom here, you see Jerusalem and the world, I guess, that people would live in. And then there's this pit that goes into the center of the earth, which is hell. And it has an entrance at some point from the upper level of the world into this pit, which is hidden but is there. And it slowly descends through the 9 levels of hell until you get to the very center of the world, which is where Satan would be located. And from there, there's a little cavern that goes up to the other side of the world and comes out on an island, the island of Purgatory, which is envisioned as a mountain. You can see here that a mountain that rises high up off the earth into heaven, almost like the Tower of Babel. And it has 9 different layers that you would go through in Purgatory, and eventually you get to the top of the mountain, you get to the Garden of Eden, and then from there you can go to, which is the Garden of Eden is the earthly paradise. You can then go to the heavenly paradise, which is seen as the 9 planets, basically. Okay, not quite the planets we have today, but you have the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and then the Empyrean, which is where God is. Okay, paradise. All right, so that's kind of an overall summary, and just remember that in the Inferno, there's 3 basic divisions. There's 9 levels of hell, but they're divided into 3 basic types of sins. The upper layers are for those who lack self-control. The middle layers are for the violent, the angry and the violent. And the lowest layers of hell are reserved for the fraudulent, the deceitful, and those who betray trust, treachery, and things like that too. All right, so Canto 12. The 7th circle of hell, the violent. It's guarded by the Minotaur. And the 7th circle is the beginning. The first part of the 7th circle is for violence against others, such as tyranny, plunder, and murder. Virgil and Dante make their way down the cliffside past the Minotaur towards the 7th circle. So the Minotaur was a creature that in Greek mythology who was held in a labyrinth by the king of Crete, Minos, and demanded that the Athenians send him a certain number of their young people each year to be eaten by the Minotaur. And the Duke of Theseus ends up going and getting some help from the princess of Crete. Crete is shown how to get into the labyrinth that the Minotaur lives into with a weapon, and he kills the Minotaur and then successfully gets back out and taking the daughter of the king as his wife. So that's the legend that's referenced there. The slope of this area of hell is scarred by a great landslide from the convulsion of the earth at the crucifixion. So the crucifixion is viewed as the ultimate violence. So the first part of the 7th circle is a boiling red river, like a river of blood, and in which tyrants and plunderers and murderers are suffering. The river bank is guarded by centaurs, who are half horse and half human, who fire arrows at any souls who venture towards the shore. So the sinners are in the river, boiling to death, and when they try and get out, they're shot with arrows by the centaurs. Alone among the denizens of hell, the centaurs are noble and dignified, and one of them carries Dante and Virgil on his back across the Red River. Here's the centaurs firing their arrows at the sinners. Canto 13, the wood of the suicides. Suicide is so the first part was for violence against others. A suicide is violence against yourself. Dante and Virgil enter a sinister wood on the river's far bank, home to those who were violent against themselves, who committed suicide. The harpies nest there. They are legendary birds with girls' faces from the Aeneid. You can see them in this picture. Dante snaps off a twig from one of the twisted trees to discover that the trees are the souls of people who have committed suicide. They abandon their bodies by killing themselves, so they are deprived of their bodies in hell, constantly agonized by the harpies, feeding off of their leaves. So the harpies eat the leaves of these trees. Dante talks to Pierre del Vigne, one of the suffering trees. He had been a servant of the emperor, but was falsely accused of some crime, and despairing, he killed himself. So they find out that at the final judgment, the trees will get their bodies back, but instead of living in them, the bodies will be hung from the tree limbs. Then they see two spendthrifts, another form of self-destruction, hunted through the woods by hounds that tear them apart. Here he is talking to Pierre del Vigne. And here are the bodies hung from the trees, and the suicides running through the spendthrifts running through the wood of the suicides. Okay, Canto 14, blasphemy. So we had violence against others, violence against self. Now we're on violence against God. And in violence against God, you have several different types. You have blasphemers, sodomites, and usurers. All right, and we'll talk about each of them in the different cantos. So Canto 14, beyond the wood is a fiery, barren plain containing the naked souls of those who are violent against God, nature, and art. They pass the blasphemers. So blasphemy is when you say something bad or evil about God, or hold evil opinions about him, and follow a stream along the plain to protect themselves against its fires. One of the blasphemers is Capaneus, one of the 7 kings who laid siege to Thebes, who held God in light esteem. Virgil tells him where the rivers of hell come from, with an image that he presents of the old man of Crete. This image is very similar to one of the visions of Nebuchadnezzar from the Bible, from Daniel chapter 2. So the legend is, on Crete, the home of civilization, in a mountain, there's an old man with a head of gold, arms of silver, and feet of iron and clay, who sheds tears that feed the several rivers of hell, the Acheron, the Styx, the Phlegethon, the Lethe, and the Cocytus. So this story reflects Dante's view that the world has gone from good to bad. In the good old days, in ancient Crete, was the golden age of civilization, and since then, through Greece and Rome and then the Middle Ages, men have become more corrupt over time. Thus the reduction from gold to silver and eventually iron and clay. So the feet of iron and clay could represent the corrupt modern, in Dante's time, empire, Roman Empire, and papacy, both of which had been corrupted and were in need of reform, which Dante points out repeatedly throughout the comedy. Their need of both of them need to be purified and redeemed. Canto 15, he meets Brunetto Latini. And this canto is about homosexuality, which is violence against nature, against God's law, or perversity. So they passed the Sodomites. Sodomites is just another word for homosexuals. And Dante recognizes one of them as his close friend and mentor, a Florentine writer called Brunetto Latini, who was Dante's former teacher. Their emotional meeting is colored by Dante's pain of discovering someone so important to him and to his life condemned to this depth of hell. But people cannot be spared from God's judgment just because Dante personally likes them. This poem is about God's message, not just Dante's. They discuss Florence, and Brunetto Latini prophesies that Dante will transcend the wickedness of the corroding city and that Dante will be exiled from Florence. Since the exile happens around the year 1300, but the book is written in 1320, the reader knows already that the prophecy has come true. Canto 16, the degradation of Florence and the abyss. Three more highly regarded Florentine sodomites approach Dante and ask for news of their beloved city. So this happens constantly throughout the entire comedy as he runs into people from Florence and other places in Italy who ask about what's going on in Florence or what's going on in Italy. They are devastated when Dante tells them how bad the city has become. Virgil and Dante reach the edge of the plain where the stream gives way to a mighty waterfall dropping down into an abyss. And Virgil takes Dante's belt and throws it over the drop as a signal. Soon enough, a monstrous creature rises up towards them. And that creature is Geryon. So Canto 17 is about usury. The sin of usury, which is violence against nature, making money without working. Okay, we're going to talk about it a little more in a minute. The monster Geryon, which is an image of fraud. It has a face like an honest man, it says, but a body of a serpent with wings. And Virgil approaches the monster and to persuade it to help them down to the next level, to fly them down through the abyss to the next level of hell. Dante, meanwhile, spots the usurers and goes to have a look at them. The usurers are obsessed with money pouches around their necks and are bad-tempered towards Dante. So, climbing on Geryon's back, Dante and Virgil take the terrifying flight down into the depths of hell, the depths of the eighth circle. So to go over usury, though, usury is the sin of lending money to others at high rates of interest. And collecting interest was forbidden by the law of Moses in Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy in the Bible. The idea that collecting interest on loans was sinful was common in the Middle Ages, and Christians who lent money were expected to receive the same back without interest. Only Jews would lend money with interest at that time, which was odd since the Jewish law forbade it. The New Testament says to expect neither repayment nor interest on a loan. In modern times, usury is seldom mentioned anymore as a sin, though. So, Canto 18, the eighth circle, the malabulge. Fraud and deception are punished here. The fraud of tempting others to sin. Here's the punishment of the panderers and seducer. The eighth circle is the malabulge, is divided into 10 concentric ditches, each containing different categories of the fraudulent. In the first ditch, panderers and seducers are forced to keep moving as horned demons whip them forward. In the second ditch, flatterers are flailing in excrement and filth. He meets Jason of the Golden Fleece there. He is there because he deceived women into thinking that he would be their husband, but then left them alone and pregnant. All right, so these are people who are tempting other people into sin or deceiving them about the truth, and they're being punished here. The next section, this is going on to Canto 19, is, and you see here, this is a picture of him meeting Pope Nicholas III, is punishment for simony. Simony is the fraud of selling church offices. So the church offices are not to be sold, they're to be given to the person that God wants them given to, or given to the most deserving person at least, not just to the person with the most money. And it's also about evil popes of Dante's time who are occupying this area of hell. So simony is a fraud against, or a deception against the public trust, that the church will be honest about it. I will read a short section here from this on page 89. It says, O Simon Magus, you his rapacious, wretched followers, who prostitute for gold and silver the things of God that should be wedded to virtue. Now the trumpets must sound for you, since you are on the third chasm. So Simon Magus is mentioned there, and Simon Magus was a magician who wanted to buy the power of the Holy Spirit to heal from the apostles. And this ditch contains the Simonists, who are named after him, those who bought and sold the church's offices and influence. For instance, there were cases of rich people buying the office of a bishop, sometimes in several dioceses. One person might be the bishop of several dioceses, and they weren't intending to be a good bishop, but just to collect the revenues from the church collections. All right, and these are the kind of corruptions that Dante is pointing out here that are being punished. These souls are trapped inside rocks with only their legs sticking out, and their feet are burned by flames. Dante is curious about a victim being burned by a redder flame whose legs are thrashing around in more agony than the others. Virgil carries him down to the rock so as to protect him from the flames, and it turns out that this person is Pope Nicholas III, who died in 1280 during Dante's lifetime. Pope Nicholas is stuck face first into a hole in the ground, and many other Simonists are below him in the same hole. I'll read you a little bit of this from page 91. So Dante speaks to him, and he cried, Are you standing there already, Boniface? Are you standing there already? The book of the future has deceived me by several years. Are you sated so swiftly with that wealth for which you did not hesitate to seize the church, our lovely lady, and then destroy her? So this is Pope Nicholas talking to who he thinks is Pope Boniface, the Pope during the time of the vision, but really it's Dante. I became like those who stand, who know not what has been said to them, unable to reply, exposed to scorn. Then Virgil said, Quickly say to him, I am not him, I am not he, I am not whom you think. So Virgil's saying, tell him that you're not Pope Boniface. And I replied as I was instructed, at which the spirit's legs writhed fiercely. And then, sighing in a tearful voice, he said to me, Then what do you want of me? If it concerns you so much to know who I am that you have left the ridge, know that I wore the great mantle. So Nicholas is waiting for his successor, Pope Boniface, to come and join him, and then he'll be shoved further down the hall, and Boniface will be shoved face first in, and the other fellow Simonists in this area of hell. After that, the next Pope, Clement, will also join them as well. So Dante apparently thought all the popes during his time were pretty much evil. You remember that the Pope before Nicholas, I think Anastasius, I think was in the top level of hell for not being able to make a decision and resigning from the papacy. So realizing that he is speaking to the late Pope, Dante roundly abuses him for selling out the church. He also thinks that the donation of Constantine, which was a fraudulent document where Constantine leaves the Western Empire to the Pope, was a bad thing for the church and corrupted it. So the donation of Constantine is where Constantine left the power of the emperor to the pope. And in medieval times, they thought it was a real thing, but it turned out later to be proven to be not a real document from Constantine. I'll read you a little more from this section. I do not know if I was too foolhardy then, but I answered him in this way. Ah, now tell me how much wealth the Lord demanded of Peter. He's talking to Nicholas here. Before he gave him the keys of the church into his keeping. Surely he demanded nothing, saying only, follow me. So he's pointing out that Christ would not have sold the church office. He wouldn't have sold the papacy to Peter, for instance. And were it not that I am still restrained by my reverence for the great keys that you held in your hand in the joyful life. So he's somewhat restrained in criticizing the Pope by the fact that he's the Pope, although apparently not too much. I would use even more forceful words, since your avarice grieves the world, trampling the good and raising the wicked. John the Evangelist spoke of shepherds such as you when he saw the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. She was born with 7 heads, and long as virtue pleased her spouse, had justification. So this is interesting here. He's comparing these popes to the whore of Babylon that's referenced in Revelation. It's also interesting because later some of the people that lead the Reformation, like Martin Luther and John Calvin, will do the same thing, making the same comparison about the popes in their time. I'll read on here. You have made a god for yourselves of gold and silver, and how do you differ from the idolaters, except that he worships one image and you 100? And now here's where he talks about the donation of Constantine. Ah, Constantine, the emperor, how much evil you gave birth to, not in your conversion, Constantine was the first Christian emperor, but in that donation that the first wealthy Pope Sylvester received from you. So Dante sees that the church having lots of money and wealth and earthly power is a bad thing for it spiritually. Canto 20 is where sorcerers, seers, and soothsayers are punished. These are people who have a type of quote unquote supernatural, natural or pagan fraud against the public trust. Okay, they're deceiving people into thinking they have special powers. In the 4th ditch are the diviners, magicians, and soothsayers, mostly classical examples. Their heads are twisted around so that they are looking backwards as they shuffle through the ditch. Virgil talks at length about Manto, who gave her name to his hometown of Mantua. He emphasizes that that's all she gave the city because it was founded after she was already dead and her wickedness had descended into hell. Canto 21. It's about embezzlement, stealing, lawsuits, all things that are fraud against the public trust. The 5th ditch of the Malabulge is... So this 5th ditch of the Malabulge is filled with boiling tar for the barrators. Barrators are swindlers in public office. The barrators encourage people to file lawsuits against each other. They are lawyers who engage in lawsuits for profit, but not because they are pursuing justice, and people who steal or embezzle money or goods from a company or from the public treasury. The travelers witness a demon hurl a barrator into the tar, and a pack of other demons stand by with hooks and pitchforks to stab at any soul who comes above the surface of the tar. Virgil tells Dante to hide, and himself goes to demand safe passage from the demons. Intimidated by Dante's invocation of the will of heaven, the chief demon gives him a guard to lead the travelers along the ridge to a bridge where they can cross the 6th ditch. The demon mentions in passing that it is currently Easter weekend. Canto 22, the demons torturing Barraters. As they follow the path, the 10 demons try to stab the Barraters whenever they surface for a moment from the pitch, from the hot tar. They hook one and haul him in. Dante is curious, and they question the man about who is about to be ripped apart. By the demons. He buys time and suggests that if the demons stand a little ways off, he can call some Italians whom Dante might be interested in meeting. As soon as the demons give him space, he makes a run for it and plunges back into the tar. The furious demons give chase and then fight among themselves, and 2 of them fall into the tar entangled with each other. Virgil and Dante slip off as the other demons try to haul them out. Canto 23 is where hypocrisy is punished. Religious or Christian hypocrisy, fraud against God. So the demons give chase, and Virgil picks up Dante and flees down the slope into the depths of the 6th ditch, where hypocrisy is punished. Down here are the hypocrites. Hypocrisy is to claim to know and follow certain beliefs, but to behave in a way that counteracts those beliefs. So way down, and you might remember that in the Bible, Jesus is constantly criticizing the Pharisees, especially for being hypocrites. Okay, they say they follow the law of Moses, and yet they find all kinds of loopholes for themselves as to why they don't have to follow certain parts of the laws of Moses. They make new rules for themselves that apparently, according to their theology, are more important than the law of God laid down in the 10 Commandments. Weighed down by hoods and cloaks, the hypocrites, they have an attractive appearance, but they are actually exhaustingly heavy, the clothing that they have to wear. The hypocrites shuffle along, wearied from their deceptive burden. Caiaphas and the other Jews who arranged Jesus' crucifixion are stretched naked on stakes. So they're among the hypocrites that are being punished here. To be walked upon by other hypocrites. When Virgil asks how they can climb out of the ditch, it becomes apparent that the demons had lied to them. There is no bridge that crosses this deep valley. So again, it's interesting just to reflect back on the 3 basic divisions of hell, and we are now in the lowest layers of hell, which is the fraudulent, the deceptive, those who betray the public trust. And think about some of the sins that fall in that 8th circle: the selling of church offices, sorcery, embezzlement, stealing, and lawsuits, fraudulent lawsuits. And then the hypocrisy, okay, claiming that you believe something but then doing the opposite. These are seen as some of the worst sins that people can commit in Dante's hell. Worse, apparently, than murder, suicide, blasphemy, and homosexuality. So things that, tyranny and plunder, things that we would probably consider to be worse in our own minds when we consider sins, especially something like murder, right? Most people would probably consider that to be the very worst sin. And yet Dante puts that kind of in the middle layers of hell, right below those who lack self-control, but definitely above the fraudulent. So why is that? So it's because it's in Dante's mind, he's looking at how natural these sins come to us and how unnatural they are. The more unnatural they are, the more they are the work of a evil will, like those who are trying to deceive and be fraudulent and lying, the worse the sin is. And the more that they are just a lack of control, like these upper ones, lack of self-control is people that eat too much, people that have too much sexual appetite and things like that, they are not considered as severe. And then in the middle is the violent, right? Who are they are also lacking in self-control. They're not unable to control their temper, unable to control their violent outbreaks. But he considers that to be a less punishable than people that are maliciously deceiving other people and breaking trust. So just something interesting to think about, and to maybe challenge our own ideas of of sins that are important. Because I think a lot of times there's a lot of times where Christians sometimes think that lying is not that big of a deal, right? That it's just a little white lie, but it may be a very big deal to God. So something to think about, and I hope you have a great week. Bye-bye.